And issues of a real vote count, voter fraud, and all that. The chairman of the Trump campaign is here.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good Thursday evening to you. The honorary chairperson, I should say, of the Donald Trump campaign, and the Honorable Representative Joe Trillo is my guest. He will be here momentarily, and he's got a lot to say about some of these alarming statistics regarding voter registration and the like. And of course, he'll put in one more pitch for Donald Trump. Thanks for joining me. Let's hustle over to the rundown and check on some things that are going on. Speaking of the presidential race, not a good news cycle for Hillary Clinton by any stretch of the imagination. Some headlines here. You really need to read these stories when you see the look. Again, it'll give you pause that the Russians created some espionage material through WikiLeaks, but you got to read them, and you may weep. Between the two stories in the New York Times and the Washington Post, you see that there's a lot of trauma over the workings, both professionally and philanthropically, for Bill Clinton. Roll it.
Hacked emails from Hillary Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta are raising more questions about payments made to the Clinton Foundation. WikiLeaks published a 12-page memo from Doug Band, a former aide to President Bill Clinton, where he says he pushed corporations that donated to the foundation to also provide in-kind services for the president and his family for personal travel, hospitality, vacation, and the like. Donald Trump has long accused the Clinton Foundation of being a slush fund for the former president. Thursday, he questioned why FBI Director James Comey chose not to prosecute Hillary Clinton over her use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State.
So you're saying Attorney General says something going on. Judge, she's so guilty.
The Clinton campaign responded, saying, "We are still not confirming the authenticity of individual emails hacked by the Russian government to influence the election by weaponizing WikiLeaks."
It's uncertain if the latest email will change the trajectory in the race. So far, none of the previously released emails have made a difference in the polls.
I think for a lot of voters, all of this stuff feels like inside baseball to them.
Both candidates will make swing state appearances today. Donald Trump has 3 events in Ohio, while Hillary Clinton heads to North Carolina, where early voting is underway.
Now, Donald Trump says he can still win, and he's right. That's why it's so important everyone gets out and votes.
Clinton will campaign with First Lady Michelle Obama for the first time today in Winston-Salem.
Or did. That was an earlier package. You know, this is big problems for the Clinton campaign. If Donald Trump wasn't Donald Trump, it would be even more profound for another Republican candidate, no doubt. How many times have we said that over the course of this season? But there's no direct link for Hillary and the foundation. It's just Billary. It's a whole concept. You know, if Donald Trump plays his cards right over the next 10 days, the deficit could shrink even more, with some emphasis on this particular story. So stay tuned. It's never over till it's over. Coming back home, and some of the conversation about the presidential race took an interesting twist with the coverage of the Providence Journal on Father Marciano from St. Kevin's in Warwick, where he suggests that you should read his homily from a couple of weekends ago on that parish website. In this story, he talks about his own soul being in peril on the right to life issue if he votes for Hillary Clinton, and I certainly accept that as a pro-life guy. He doesn't offer any suggestions as to whether your vote's in peril, however, or your soul is in peril on a vote for Hillary Clinton. But then he gets into the notion that all Democrats hate Catholics, and he says it 3 times, which is something tough to swallow. And then he suggests that there's even more damning of Hillary Clinton to be had, my words, based on her email server issues. You know, as a practicing Catholic, you know, I want to hear from the clergy about how to be guided in the election. But the propaganda coming from the pulpit is a very unhealthy thing. Father Marciano was on the Matt Allen radio program yesterday.
Our religion does impact upon the leaders that we elect. I encourage my people. I didn't tell them how to vote. I said, don't leave your Catholic faith at the voting booth. Take it in with you and make the right choices that will impact society in a positive way.
I think the church has to do a better job of instructing Catholics as to what their Catholicism means when it comes to their voting. It's a complicated conversation. read Father Marciano's homily and decide for yourself whether you think it's appropriate. We'd love to have him in here to talk about it next week, and we'll make that invitation available. In the meantime, this is an endorsement 180, sort of. Yeah, I think that's probably true. So this is a person, Shauna Lawton, who's very pleasant, and I thought was, you know, a newcomer, but eminently qualified to at least take a run at state representative. She began this whole campaign running against Stephen Frias in the Republican primary. We have a B-roll of that. We have, that's something we call it in the business. We have a picture of Mr. Frias. Yeah, I think we do. There's Steve Frias. Now, Ms. Lawton and Mr. Frias competed in the Republican primary to face off against the House Speaker, Nick Mattiello, who we also have some video of, if we could show that. But interestingly enough, after all that was said and done in the primary, and Mr. Frias handily beat Ms. Lawton, Ms. Lawton comes up with these promotional gizmos that are landing in mailboxes, and if Jess, you could swing back to that, that would make a full circle. Thank you. Things I learned on the campaign trail. All these things she learned about Nick Mattiello that make her want to vote for him, and the things she learned about Steve Frias to make her not want to vote for him. Crazy, and the chairman of the Republican Party is exasperated.
This is a woman that just joined the GOP. She's shilling for Mattiello. What if she won the primary with all of Mattiello's unaffiliated voters that he rated the election with? You know, would she be rolling over and just supporting him then too?
It's nutty. Now you've probably, if you listen to the radio show, you probably heard Ms. Lawton because she was scheduled for 4 o'clock today. We taped the radio show. I'm sorry, the radio show is live. The TV show is taped. What day is it? Who's on first, third base? Joe Trillo will straighten it all out for me. I'm interested to see if Joe's got an opinion on this one too, because only in Rhode Island and only in Republican politics. Crazy stuff. And then you go right to the crazy stuff in East Providence, campaign sabotage. Only in Rhode Island does a press conference actually get paid attention to with a guy who's running for state representative, longtime guy over there, Brian Coogan, who's alleged to have stolen some signs he and his friend, on a motorcycle caper, only to have they drop the signs and they get caught, and then he holds a press conference about a write-in candidacy since he lost in a primary, and he said, well, they took my signs too. That's all you have to know. In East Providence, you figure it out, because I'm not going to spend all the time trying. It's just more flavor of what goes on in Rhode Island elections. Now, the serious stuff about Rhode Island elections is the numbers. Take a look at this. Here is a headline the other day with a thought on it from our guest. Donald Trump talks about voter fraud. If this is the case, that there's this many people, it's really a concern. What are the safeguards? Asks Joe Trillo in the Providence Journal, and you can ask the question again right here. My friend, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. This has gotten some serious attention.
And well, it should.
Yeah. I'm not so sure it's the problem that the headlines understandably cause people to think it is.
You might be right on that.
Yes.
After just leaving, before I came here, I went to my Warwick Board of Campuses, just to have a couple of people that I know there that are pretty dependable explain to me what exactly we're doing in Warwick. I knew we were doing something to clean up the rolls in Warwick, but even after talking to this person, I'm convinced that there's a significant area there where there could be a problem, where you could have duplicate voting. If you live in Cumberland and you move to Warwick, and you don't tell Cumberland that you've moved to Warwick, but you register in Warwick, there is a safeguard in place, which was demonstrated to me today, where once you fill out your voter registration form, they go to the computer is networked with all the 39 cities and towns. They plug in your name, and when your name goes in with your date of birth, you will pop up as being registered in Cumberland while your new application is in Warwick, and they supposedly will remove you from Cumberland. Now, if that holds true, I think it's good considering the terrible numbers we have out there. But if you move to Florida and you want to vote in Rhode Island and you want to vote in Florida, there's no network there that's going to prevent you from voting in both locations.
All right, so that's interesting. Know that this 189,000 number the Journal came up with here represents the number of people who are on the rolls who should not be voting, either having moved, as Joe explains, or having been passed away. Let's make it clear. Most people should know it is illegal to vote twice.
Right.
You can't vote twice.
And there's a significant fine. But how do you prove that? How do you really prove it? I mean, unless a high-profile person like me or you went into a board of canvassers and got recognized as we're going to try to vote twice. And that's very unlikely, because that would be about the stupidest thing either one of us could do. But if you're not a high-profile person and you walk in both voting locations, who knows you?
Nellie Gorbea, the Secretary of State, talked about this at WPRO yesterday. She also had, follow the news coverage, she had a whole big seance on the integrity of voting based on all of the rigged conversation going on. Here's what she said about this.
We've had excess people before I was in office, and we've been addressing it. But you cannot just remove people unless you have either a death certificate or you have the person themselves reporting the change of address.
And so that's her summary judgment on that. On a scale of 0 to 10, 0, no worried, 10, very worried, how worried are you about this number?
Well, I would say that it's too big of a number not to be worried about it. So I'm probably at a 7 to be worried about.
She says, look, it takes 2 election cycles by law to examine and to pull people off the rolls because people have a right not to vote and still be registered.
Yes.
And so it takes a couple of
And
presidential
she's right
cycles.
with that. Yeah, they can't do it. But they're not.
Or election cycles.
But they're not doing it for every person every 2 election cycles. They're basically waiting for the government, the city or the town, to send out some sort of notice to this person and have it sent back in the mail that it was undeliverable. And then they go and try to verify it.
The big question is, does this feed the election is rigged Trumpian beast? And the honorary chairperson will tell us about that when we come back. Stay with us.
There is the issue of voter fraud. Isn't it amazing the way they say there's no voter fraud? Folks, it's a rigged system, and it's a rigged election, believe me. According to the highly respected Pew, there are 24 million voter registrations in the United States that are either invalid or significantly inaccurate.
Now, that number is fed in part by the 189,000 number that we're talking about here.
It's a big number.
I heard you on the radio last night telling Tara that that you wanted to let the Trump folks know about the 189. I think they already know about the 24 million.
Right.
Yeah.
But I thought we were such an out of proportion state. It's 31%. 31%
of our registered voters.
Our registered voters our voter registration is incorrect in some way, which is insane. So how do we go there and fix it? I mean, I was just hit with the problem 2 days ago.
We expect over 500,000 voters. Well, we have over 500,000 voters that are eligible for this election, but we have this just less than 200,000 that are incorrectly allocated.
Yeah.
Some passed away. Some we don't know we don't know where they are necessarily.
Right. We don't know whether they moved. We don't know whether they're being registered in
We're not going to have 189,000 fraudulent votes. That's not going to happen.
No, that's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
But you know what? We just lost some elections. We watched primaries lose. You had him on the show the other day, who's a good friend of mine, John DeSimone. He lost by 21 votes. I mean, every vote really counts. And if you take a district, and over the years, I can tell you lots of people that have lost by 2 and 3 votes. I mean, Bill Sambento won his election by 1 vote.
God rest his soul. We lost Billy. Quite the character, wasn't he?
Garbage.
Garbage. And I've seen more garbage in Rhode Island. How many times did I run that audio on the radio side?
A million.
Since you brought up Representative DeSimone in District 5, the majority leader who got beat in the primary, you're supporting him spiritually?
Well, spiritually, I support
Mr. Republican for the Democrat.
You know, I think that John DeSimone is a conservative guy. I always gravitated, you know, you have to make friends in the room. I was there 16 years. I always gravitated towards people who thought the way I thought. John DeSimone certainly is a conservative Democrat.
Well, you know what? I'm going to ask you more about that in the next segment. Let's stay on the Trump and the Trump and the rigged election thing. Talk to me about that. The rigged election, the system.
Well, do I think that there's an effort to actually hurt Trump out there? Yeah, I do. I do. I think
by which entities?
By the Democratic Party. I think the Democratic
Party. It's
Party.
called a competition.
No, I think the Democratic Party has mastered the art of voter manipulation. I think they did it in Rhode Island, and I think they've done it all across the country. They have been, how about the guy 2 or 3 election cycles ago, and I talked about this, I think, on Tari yesterday, 2 or 3 election cycles that was going around in Providence trying to sell 500 mail-in ballots to the highest bidder. Do you remember that story?
I do.
Okay. Would you call that rigging an election?
No, I would call that voter fraud.
Oh, no, I would call it rigging a rep seat election in a given city.
Well, it depends on who's at the bottom of it. I don't remember who eventually caught
and I don't either.
the responsibility for that. But an individual's entrepreneurial effort to manipulate or rig the election is not necessarily the rigged election systemic thing that you're alleging the Democrats have. That guy was just, you know, a one-off.
But there have been other
instances.
Alleged
criminal.
I remember Anastasia Williams, who's also a representative,
a Democrat,
complaining that she had people trying to manipulate voters in her district. So let's call it manipulation. You don't like to use the word rigged. I like to use the word rigged, but manipulation. Anytime you alter the outcome by one vote, intentionally, you're making an attempt to rig an election.
Well, here's the thing. I think we've gotten caught up in all sorts of words and definition problems. I think the Democratic Party nomination process is rigged.
Yeah, well,
in the sense that the superdelegates supersede, and so the system is set up for party leadership to eventually choose the nominee. The Republicans less so. However, in this particular cycle, I bet you there are a lot of Republicans who think that they wish they had superdelegate influence much more like the Democrats so that Donald Trump would not have been successful and rip this party to shreds. But that's the rigging that I think you could systemically charge either party with. Voter fraud is something that you've got to be careful in charging, but you certainly have to investigate, and I think they're 2 very different things.
Well, you know, we could argue this. We could argue this. We could argue this for hours. I think I summed up my position on this, and do I agree with Donald Trump that there's voter fraud out there? Yes. How widespread is it? I don't think anybody knows.
So what happens if he loses the election by an identifiable margin?
What happens? Nothing happens. Nothing ever happens. I mean, he can walk around crying about it for the next 3 years. Nothing's going to happen.
Well, well, he very well might.
Because once it's over, it's over. And we need to come together as a country and support whatever individual gets elected.
That's the reasonable position that I knew that you would take. And that's where it's got to be hard to support a guy like Donald Trump who doesn't guarantee that he'll come to your level of reasonability. And I think that's serious.
I think you're going to see Donald Trump come to the realization if he loses that he's lost and he needs to get on board with Hillary Clinton if he has to get on board.
If he continues to perpetuate the notion that he lost to a rigged system, that will be harmful, will it not be?
Well, I think Donald Trump has blazed a lot of trails. And when you go listen to Michael Moore's tape, which came out, he really did a masterful job at summing up why Donald Trump is going to win.
That's got nothing to do with the rigged election. That's why Moore's commentary is about the market share reaction to Donald Trump, which is an interesting and astute analysis.
But what he's saying about Donald Trump is he's like throwing hand grenades all over the place. So now he's going to blow up the rigging of elections. He's going to make us rethink the way our democracy's been functioning for the last 100 years. He's already done it. And that's what Washington needs. He said he's going to drain the swamp. The swamp needs to be drained. It needs to be drained. It's full of lobbyists that come into the Washington Beltway there, and all they do is pay money to all our senators and our representatives and corrupt them once we send them to Washington. So somebody gets elected, they get elected with the greatest intentions. But if everybody knows they're going to need money to get reelected. And in order to get money to get reelected, they need lobbyists to support them.
Do you think all of that swamp will be drained with the Trump election?
I don't think it's all going to get drained, but I think he's going to shake it and blow it up, and that's what I want to see him do.
All right. See what's happening here at home next. Stay with us. Joe and I are doing 3 shows. 2 of them are on background here. I love hanging out with Joe. What's going to happen here in Rhode Island? By the way, what's your take on what's happened with the Republicans in the Mattiello District 15 race there with, as we talked about at the top of the show, with Ms. Lawton and Mr. Frias, and now she's supporting Mattiello. It's tough to be a Republican in the state these days and keep track of what's going on.
It is tough to be a Republican. You're absolutely right. And, you know, I mean, she's certainly within her rights to do whatever she wants to do.
Sure.
I have publicly said that I thought Nick Mattiello, I said it to you, Nick Mattiello has been good for the state. He gave us the master lever. I wouldn't have dreamed in my wildest dream that a Democrat would have ever let that pass the House.
Are you recommending to District 15 voters that they
I'm
don't
not
vote for the
recommending
Republican?
anything to anybody. I am going to tell you that he has done things for the Republican Party that the Republican Party could have never done for itself. And one of them was eliminate the master lever.
So tell me, as the honorary co-chair or chair or whatever you are of the Trump campaign, what have you learned over the course of this cycle? Have you enjoyed it?
Oh, I really have. I've really enjoyed being involved with the Trump campaign. I was on early in June. It was when I was announced as the honorary chairman, and I've enjoyed it. It's been great. I've been threatened a few times. I've been insulted. I've been, you know, but I don't care. I don't care. I got a tough skin.
Well, we already did our kind of swan song with you as you exit your representative life, and you know I'm going to have you back a lot because I want to have, you know, I need a little fix of Trillo talks inside Dan Yorke's State of Mind. It's kind of a hybrid here, but your message to the voters amidst rigging and fraud and Trump and all of that heading toward November 8th is what?
My method is that Donald Trump is our only hope for president, and if you vote for anybody else, you're voting for Hillary Clinton, which I would like to tell you, Dan. I still would like to follow you in the voting book and make sure that I got a funny feeling you're going to cross that line that says Donald Trump.
You do?
I just got that feeling you're going to cross that line.
Well, let me tell you something. If I'm going to do that, then he's going to win the election.
I know.
Because if I'm going to do that, then there's a whole bunch of folks who throw up over Donald Trump that are going to do it because I throw up regularly. By the way, see how nice I've been? Just giving the Trump air some breathing room
This
around
is all the
here.
air you've given it.
I mean, huh?
You
told me there's nobody else around to talk for him.
I'm not allowed to give you people's names.
We couldn't find anybody other than this guy to come here and stand for Donald Trump. What does that tell you? 10 seconds.
That's not true. There's
We
plenty
can't
of people.
find anybody
there's
formally
plenty
to
of
come
people.
here and do
but
that.
I can't give them to you. You have to get them. I can't give them to you. Anybody who wants to stand for Donald Trump, give them a call.
Whatever, look at Lexi looking at you like you got 3 heads. Whatever rock you're hiding under, please let us know. We might try to sneak you in before Election Day. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, as always.
All right, final word and we can come back. Really? Where are you? So we've spent some time talking about the questions, the bond issues that you'll have to decide upon on November 8th. Coming up on tomorrow night's show, you'll hear the folks who say no across the board on the money questions 3 through 7. Hey, everyone's got a perspective, and you need that. Just smarten up on those bond questions so you don't keep the lines jammed up on Election Day. Have a good night.